The night Selene Marrow died, the moon turned red over Voss Hollow. At least, that was what the pack whispered for years afterward. Cain Ashfeld, the Alpha King, never spoke of that night, if he could help it. He remembered only pieces, the sound of steel against steel, the smell of smoke rising from the eastern border, and the moment a scout knelt before him and said the words that broke something inside his chest forever. Selene is gone. We found no body, my king, but no one could have survived that fire. 3 years had passed since then. 3 years of ruling a kingdom with a heart that felt like stone. Cain had built Voss Hollow into a place of order and strength, feared by rival packs and respected by his own. But those who knew him best, his Beta Ronin and his old advisor Mira, saw the truth beneath the crown. The king did not sleep well. He did not laugh anymore. He visited the memorial stone near the training grounds more often than anyone dared mention, and he never, not once, allowed anyone to speak of taking a new mate. It was on the 3rd anniversary of her disappearance that everything changed. A hunting party had gone into the Whisperwood at dusk, tracking a wounded stag for the coming feast. They returned before midnight, pale and shaken, refusing to look each other in the eye. When Ronan brought them before Cain, the youngest of them, a boy barely past his first shift, could hardly get the words out. We heard someone singing, "My King," near the old temple, a woman's voice. It was her song, the one Selene used to sing to the pups at winter gatherings. Cain's expression did not change, but his hand, resting on the arm of his chair, tightened until his knuckles turned white. He told them it was the wind playing tricks, or perhaps an owl's cry twisted by memory and grief. He told them to go rest. But that night, for the first time in 3 years, Cain Ashfeld did not sleep at all. He sat by the window of his chamber, staring toward the dark line of trees that hid the Whisperwood, and he remembered every note of that song. By morning, he had made his decision, though he told no one but Ronan. The ancient Moon Temple stood at the heart of the Whisperwood, a ruin so old that even the elders could not say exactly when it had been built. Long ago, before the first packs had claimed the land, it was said to be a place where mates found each other beneath the full moon, where the bond between two souls was said to be strongest. Over centuries, the temple had crumbled, swallowed by vines and silence, avoided by hunters and pack members alike. There were old stories about the ruins being cursed, about voices that called out to travelers and led them astray. Cain had never believed such stories. He believed in strength, in duty, in the things he could see and touch. But grief, he was learning, made a person doubt what they thought they knew. That evening, under a moon nearly full, Cain rode alone into the Whisperwood, telling his guards he needed time to think. Ronan wanted to follow, but Cain forbade it. This was something he had to face by himself. The forest grew quieter the deeper he went, the usual sounds of night birds and rustling leaves fading into a stillness that pressed against his ears. When he finally reached the clearing where the temple stood, moonlight poured down over broken stone pillars and a floor cracked by centuries of roots and rain. Cain dismounted and walked slowly toward the ruins, his heart pounding in a way it had not in years. Then he heard it. A voice, soft and familiar, drifting from somewhere within the crumbling walls. It was singing the same lullaby the young hunter had described, the one Selene used to hum while braiding flowers into the hair of the pack's children. Cain's breath caught in his throat. He told himself it could not be real, that his mind was finally breaking under the weight of grief he had carried too long alone. But he could not stop his feet from moving toward the sound. Cain, the voice called, and this time it was not singing. It was speaking his name, the way only Selene ever had, with a softness that made him feel, for one impossible moment, like the king title did not matter at all. He was simply Cain again, a man who loved a woman with his whole heart. He entered what remained of the temple's inner chamber, moonlight falling through a broken roof onto a stone altar in the center. There was no one there, no body, no shadow, nothing but old stone and moss. Yet the voice came again, closer now, as though someone stood right beside him. "I am here, Cain. Please don't leave." His chest ached with a pain sharper than anything he had felt since the day he was told she had died. "Selene," he said, his voice breaking over her name. "Where are you? Show yourself to me." "I cannot," the voice answered, filled with sorrow. Something is holding me here. I don't understand it myself. I have tried for so long to reach you. Cain stayed at the temple until dawn began to lighten the sky, speaking softly to the empty air, refusing to leave, even when the voice grew faint, and eventually disappeared with the fading moonlight. When he finally returned to Voss Hollow, he said nothing about what happened, but Mira, the old seer who had served 3 generations of Alpha Kings, took one look at his face and knew something had shifted. "You heard her, didn't you?" Mira said when they were alone in her study, surrounded by shelves of old texts and dried herbs. It was not a question. Cain did not deny it. He told her everything, the song, the voice, the way it had called his name, as though Selene were standing right beside him, alive and searching for a way back. Mira listened without interrupting, her aged eyes growing distant, as if she were remembering something from long ago. "There are old stories," she finally said, "about the Moon Temple and the bonds it holds. It was built by the first Pax as a sacred place, tied to the magic of mates. If a bond is strong enough, and if something terrible happens before it can be broken by death itself, sometimes the temple holds on to what should have been lost. Cain, I believe Selene may still be alive, not as a spirit, but bound somehow between this world and something else." Cain's hands trembled, something they had not done in years. "If she is alive," he said, his voice low and fierce, "then I will find a way to bring her back, whatever it costs me." Mira warned him that such magic was old and dangerous, tied to covens long since scattered but not entirely gone. She spent the following days searching her oldest texts, and Cain visited the temple every night the moon allowed, always hearing Selene's voice, always feeling closer to the truth, yet no closer to seeing her face. Each night, her voice grew a little more desperate, a little more afraid, as though something inside the ruins was slowly draining what remained of her strength. "Please hurry, Cain," she said one night, her voice barely above a whisper. "I feel myself fading. I don't know how much longer I can hold on." It was Mira who finally uncovered the truth. Buried in an old scroll passed down through generations of seers was the story of a rogue coven that had once clashed with Voss Hollow's ancestors over the sacred ground of the temple. The coven had been driven out, but not before placing a binding curse on the ruins, a curse meant to trap any wolf who dared enter during a moment of great vulnerability, feeding on their life force slowly over time. Selene, gravely wounded the night of the border raid, must have stumbled into the temple grounds seeking shelter, and the ancient curse had claimed her before she could escape, trapping her between life and death, her body hidden from sight, her voice the only part of her still able to reach the living world. The scroll spoke of one way to break such a binding. The mate bond itself, when reaffirmed through blood and unwavering will beneath a full moon, could unravel the curse's hold, but it demanded sacrifice. The alpha seeking to save his mate would have to surrender his own power, even if only temporarily, weakening himself completely in order to weaken the magic trapping her. Ronan argued against it fiercely when Cain revealed his plan. "Without your alpha strength, even for a moment, you would be vulnerable to anyone who wished you harm. We cannot guarantee your safety, my king." Cain looked at his oldest friend with a calm certainty that silenced further argument. "I have ruled this kingdom for 3 years with half a heart," he said. "If there is even the smallest chance that Selene is alive and waiting for me, then my safety means nothing next to that. I would rather risk everything than live 1 more year without trying." On the night of the next full moon, Cain rode to the temple with Ronan and Mira beside him, along with a small guard to ensure no outside threat interrupted what was to come. The remaining sorceress of the old coven, tracked down through weeks of careful searching, was brought to the clearing under guard as well, bound by iron and old wards to prevent her from causing harm. She did not resist. In fact, there was something almost like relief in her tired eyes when she saw the temple again. "The curse was never meant to hold this long," she admitted quietly. "I was young and angry when it was cast, and I have carried the weight of it since. If you are willing to pay the price, Alpha King, I will help you undo what my coven began." Under the full moon, with Mira reciting old words of protection, and the sorceress guiding the ritual, Cain knelt before the temple altar and offered his blood, and with it, willingly surrendered his alpha strength for the span of 1 moonrise. The transformation was immediate and terrible. Cain felt the power that had defined him for years drain away, leaving him weak, mortal, achingly human, in a way he had not felt since before his first shift as a boy. But he did not falter. He kept his eyes on the crumbling stone where Celine's voice had always seemed to come from, and he called her name with everything he had left. "Celine, come back to me. I am here. I have always been here." The temple seemed to shudder, ancient stones trembling, as though the earth itself remembered the pain buried within them. The moonlight brightened until it was almost blinding, pouring down like liquid silver over the altar. And then, from the very air itself, a shape began to form, faint at first, then steadily more solid, until Celine Marrow knelt on the temple floor before him, thin and pale, her clothes worn from years trapped between worlds, but undeniably, wonderfully alive. Cain did not hesitate. Weak as he was, he crossed the distance between them and gathered her into his arms, as though he might never let go again. Celine wept against his chest, her fingers curling into his shirt, her whole body trembling with relief and exhaustion. "I never stopped calling for you," she whispered, "even when I thought no one could hear." "I heard you," Cain said, his own voice breaking. "I will always hear you." The sorceress, true to her word, completed the final piece of the ritual, sealing the broken curse so it could never trap another soul within the temple's walls. As dawn began to break over the Whisperwood, painting the sky in soft gold and rose, Cain's alpha strength slowly returned to him, but he barely noticed. All that mattered was the woman in his arms, breathing, warm, and finally free. They rode back to Voss Hollow together, as the sun rose fully over the kingdom. Word spread through the pack like wildfire, and by the time they reached the gates, the entire community had gathered, disbelief and joy mixing on every face. Ronan was the first to step forward, bowing deeply before Celine with tears in his eyes. Mira simply smiled, satisfied, as though she had known all along that love strong enough could outlast even the oldest magic. In the weeks that followed, Celine slowly regained her strength, and Voss Hollow began to heal in ways it had not since her disappearance. Cain ruled differently now, his decisions softened by a heart that finally beat whole again. He visited the temple once more, not to search for a lost voice in the dark, but to stand beside Celine in the daylight, watching as she planted a small circle of moonflowers among the old stones, a quiet promise that what once brought sorrow to that place would now only be remembered with hope. Standing there with her hand in his, Cain made a silent vow to whatever forces had watched over their bond through all that darkness. No curse, no distance, no length of time would ever again come between them. Celine had called out to him across worlds, and he had answered. Whatever came next, they would face it together, exactly as they were always meant to.